This is State Representative Roger Bruce, and we want to welcome you to another edition of Under the Gold Dome, where we have good, candid conversations about issues and topics of interest to you in our community. And today we're going to be talking about diversity in purchasing with the state government. And to help us with the conversation, we have some very good, intelligent individuals who are dealing with this subject all the time. So why don't you just take a second to introduce yourselves and who you represent.
Greetings, everyone. I am Mariah Muhammad. I serve as president of the Georgia Black Constructors Association. We are a statewide association advocating and educating on a daily basis for those in the construction industry.
All right.
Greetings. My name is Stacey, and I head up an organization called the Georgia Minority Supplier Development Council, GMSDC. And we represent ethnic minorities throughout the state, connecting them to corporations to do business, to grow their business.
Okay. And you also serve on?
I also serve on the GDOT board, the Georgia Department of Transportation Board, representing the mighty 5th Congressional District.
And if I'm not mistaken, some of the topics that we're going to cover today, you guys have already taken this up in the Department of Transportation.
Yes, Department of Transportation has clearly been a leader in this area, so I truly applaud Commissioner McMurray under his leadership. They have taken steps in this direction. That is correct.
And we're going to now basically try to, have this go across to all departments within the state. Rodney?
Yes, I'm Rodney Littles, president of R.J. Littles and Associates, Management and Financial Consultants, and a senior legislative aide to State Representative Roger Bruce for the last so many years.
All right, and there's an empty chair over there, and it's not a ghost. There's another gentleman that will be joining us shortly. His name is Rodney as well. And when he comes, we're just going to let him come in and take a seat. But let's get right into it. There's a piece of legislation that Rodney and I have been working on for several years that basically will create a Department of Diversity within the Department of Administrative Services. And the idea behind that is to have this department look at all of the purchasing that takes place in the state, and where there are discrepancies, to basically come up with programs and policy that will make it equitable for everybody to participate in the purchasing process within the state. That's it in a nutshell.
Beautiful.
And it's met resistance over the years, and but we're going to keep trying. And hopefully what we will have accomplished today is to talk about why this is important to the state, not just to minority contractors, but to everybody. I've said often on this program that if we all work together and we all are doing positive things and we all succeed, everybody benefits from that. It's not just minority companies. Everybody benefits when the economy is robust and everybody gets a chance to participate. Is that?
Well said.
Okay. So why don't we just start with you? What are your thoughts as it relates to this program and the ideas that we're, not the program, but the legislation, and how does this impact what you do?
Well, first of all, everyone at this table knows that I do not use the word minority, diversified, or my constituents are blacks, and that's because currently in the state that we're in, and the law as it represents minority puts us at the bottom. Mm-hmm. Not where we were when we first legislated that law. But regards to the law that you are proposing, it will help us. I do applaud the work that GDOT is doing so far, but we have a long way to go in terms of the construction and purchasing areas with where we are in the state, because we are still left behind. We are still advocating and educating people that we are still under the 30%. We're not even at 15%. So every day we're working. So this law across the board will help put us in a position where we can at least not be equal, because we're still not there yet, but at least put us on the playing field.
Yeah, and this term equal is a misleading term.
It is.
For a lot of reasons. And you want to address what you guys are doing?
A couple of things. You said most of the state is not at 15%. GDOT is at 15%. But I think the advantage of having a policies and procedures around supplier diversity for the state of Georgia. It gives a common policy across the state for doing business. GDOT may be doing one thing, another organization, the University System of Georgia is doing another thing, but some consistency across the state opens up opportunity for everyone. GMSDC primarily works with the corporate sector, corporations, all the ones you know and love here, Georgia Power, Coca-Cola, UPS, Delta Airlines, all have supplier diversity programs because they have determined that this is not only is the right thing to do, but it's good business.
Right.
And it impacts shareholder value.
Speak to the good business piece, because I think a lot of times that get lost.
Oh yeah.
It's good for everybody. So talk
Absolutely.
about that a little bit.
And so let's not fool ourselves. Corporations do this because it creates shareholder value.
Right.
That's what drives this. Not because it feels good, it's the right, it's shareholder value, it's business. And so small and diverse businesses bring to the table innovation, ingenuity. They can attack problems because they're nimble and flexible. They bring cost savings. All of that drives to shareholder value. That's why they do it. And so if the state of Georgia is interested in bringing shareholder value to us as taxpayers, it's important that they consider looking at supplier diversity. We're looking to taking our tax dollars and stretching them. We're shareholders, stretching them as far as we can.
Right.
That's shareholder value. So it makes good business sense for the state to be looking at that same thing. Corporations are doing it. Why wouldn't the state consider it?
Rodney, why don't you chime in? Talk about the background for all of this and
Right.
kind of bring us up to speed.
Yes, sir. Well, first of all, African Americans have 2% of the nation's wealth. 2%. That's over the last 400 years. Originally, when the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, there were roughly 4 million slaves that were promised 40 acres and a mule. Well, quite frankly, the impact that would have been 6 million more jobs in our community, 1.4 million more businesses, $1 trillion in revenue, $8 trillion in wealth that we don't have. That's the impact of the policies of this country going back in time. Now, you say, okay, well, what happened to the rest of the land? Well, 240 million acres were donated to 1.4 million white immigrants out west. Of course, we know whose land that was at one time. But quite frankly, we're not talking about reparations, because when we talk about reparations, we be talking about $24 trillion. We're talking about a bill that has an economic impact of less than $2 million initially and less than $1 million a year going forward. So we're not talking about reparations, folks. We're talking about fair share. And the bottom line is, as my colleagues would say, we're talking about jobs. This is about creating jobs. Most of the businesses in our community are small businesses. Most of the jobs that are created in the country are created by small businesses.
Right.
So what we're talking about is a fair share, not more than our fair share. And the way that's done, according to the bill, the way Roger has structured it, there would be a disparity study done to determine what disparity may exist in specific industries for specific groups. That's Black, Hispanic, and other minorities.
And we know the disparities exist. We already know that.
We know that.
So we have to go through a process. Unfortunately, you're going through a process to show what we already know, that there are disparities. But now you mentioned jobs, but this
Yes,
goes
sir.
beyond just jobs.
Yes, sir.
This goes to building wealth.
Right.
And building wealth in a community that has been denied access to the opportunity to build wealth. We have not been able to get the bonding that we needed, the insurance that we needed, the funding that we needed, and all of that it has a historic reality. Unfortunately, we know what happened that caused us to get here. So you mentioned the term equal, and that's where I said I think that the term equal is a little bit thrown off. When you have a situation where one community was working basically for free, and they were told, if you go and you do the work in the fields and you do all of the things that we tell you to do, then we will take care of your food, clothing, and shelter. Is that basically what happened?
That is what happened.
And then while that was happening, on the other side, wealth was being created by this free labor. And that wealth that was being created got passed down from generation to generation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and what got passed down on the other side was dependency. If you do the work, we'll take care of your food, clothing, and shelter. And that got passed down. And that's why people, go and they kind of beg for a job. That's that being passed down. Unfortunately, that created two different segments that are not equal. And so when you tell me to go out and compete equally, that's very difficult for me to accept, because what was passed down from generation to generation was not equal. Is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement. And as Stacey said, it's good value to the companies, stock value. However, that when you're dealing with these companies, because even today, you talk about the corporations is that you represent, and on this side of the table, some of those same corporations are still using the same small businesses over and over. We want to kind of break that shield. And when we talk about small black businesses, these corporations still feel, and I have conversations with them on the other side of the table, that we are looking for a hand out. We're not. We're looking for a hand up. We're just trying to compete in the business area that we're currently in.
Okay, what are some examples of things where we've been denied that you're aware of? Contracts that you've gone after that where and I know this has happened more than once. You go after the contracts and they have a request for proposal that you can't possibly, the guidelines, you can't meet them.
And not only, and some of the guidelines we can meet. And so what really truly happens on this side for black contractors and constructors is that we get requests for bids and proposals, and we have a week to 10-day turnaround. Whereas their counterparts more than likely have the same bid or proposal 4 weeks out. And most of us have limited administrative assistance. So it's difficult for us to stop, put together a proposal, and then try to get back to the business to keep the doors open. So we just want to kind of be on the ball field, because you're right, it's not equal at all. I had a conversation with someone representing Mayor Bottom's office, and I know she's got a hard job ahead of her, and she's been trying to assist. They wanted to know, what are your issues at the airport? Well, it's the same thing, constantly. Using the same people over and over again.
Okay.
How do we get in? Why are they still having problems getting clearance? There are qualified black people out here to do the work.
And so how do we've identified the problem. We know what the problem is. What's the solution?
Well, I want to make a couple of comments to what Brenda said. A couple. Margaret has said. Yes, there are challenges in terms of RFPs and requests for proposals, and part of the role of GMSDC is building the relationship, because relationships matter. People do business with people they like. We can debate it, we can discuss it, we may not agree with it, but they do business with people they know and like. And I've had a relationship with Bob for years, and I keep wanting to do business with Bob because I like Bob, and Bob and I go out. That's how it is.
Right.
But Bob also has an opportunity to maybe a second tier. It's not ideal, but second tier as part working with Bob. But if I start to build a relationship and connecting with this company over time, other opportunities are going to come that Bob doesn't get, that I will have a chance to compete with. One of the things that we're working toward right now, as we look at our event coming up in April, is that trying to get all the opportunities we can now. Last year we had our Business Opportunity Expo. I had 250 opportunities that I had no minority businesses for, left over.
And why is that?
Because I had no minority businesses that could fulfill any of those requests. 200, it's the most in 11 years I've been with this organization.
Well, let's dig delve into that. Because even if you could not find a minority company to do this one thing, was it possible to create a company made up of 2 or 3 of these smaller companies that could combined do the work that you needed to get done? I mean, we got to think out of the box.
You got to have timing. That's why it's important to get the opportunities to ahead of time, because you can't get them too late.
Mhm.
Because if you get it 30 days, it's not enough time to create a company. Sometimes you can, but if it's a large opportunity, you just don't physically, and they've all got to agree on the terms and conditions and a strategic alliance, and sometimes they won't allow a strategic alliance. In some cases, is that not correct?
That is correct. But again, as State Representative said, that is even within the construction industry.
Yes.
Because I tell them, don't try to bite the elephant. You can't eat
Right.
the whole pie. Let's take a slice of it. So if you have a portion of the contract that you can fulfill and the opportunity came to you, don't leave the contract. Pick up the phone, call us, send us an email, and let us put someone with you who can help you fulfill that contract.
Can you think of one of the projects that you were working on where you could not find a company?
I can't, because it's a year old. We're ramping up for that event now. We're starting earlier,
Okay.
and we're trying to make
Why don't you
sure.
tell people about the event?
We're having our Business Opportunity Exchange on April the 25th and 26th. It's being hosted at Cox Enterprises, and that's where we take opportunities from our corporations. For example, I'm looking for a general contractor, and so I've got all the criteria. I put that out to all of my suppliers. The ones that want to, they have an opportunity to stand up in front of Georgia Power or whomever and present for that opportunity that day.
Okay.
And so we do that with all the opportunities that we get, but we're starting earlier, we're starting now, so that again, I may have an opportunity. I don't have anybody, but I can call her and say, listen, I got 3 things that I can't get done. Can you help me? Can we work together?
Right.
Or I may have to call somebody else. Look, I'm seeing something happening here. Can you help me? But we didn't know that. We got, that was the first time we had that was last year.
Okay, but given that we know what happened last year,
We're doing something different this year. We're
that's
starting
what
earlier.
I said.
That's
We're
what
starting
I
earlier.
said.
We're starting earlier this year
Okay.
so that we can have a strategy and not get caught like we did last year.
okay.
I think in addition, I know for the past few years, Georgia Black Constructors Association, GBCA, we've been reaching out to the heads of organizations such as GMSDC and Urban League and the other ones to help them understand that we have to be in collaboration with
I agree
each
with you.
other.
Yep,
You
I
know,
agree.
because I don't feel like there's any competition here. There is no
there's no
competition.
competition.
We're all working for the same goal. You know, so I work directly with all of the black chambers. I'm working with Stacey and
I
Nancy,
need her, actually.
and we
I
all
really
need
need you.
to work more together
Yeah.
and helping to fulfill these opportunities, because there are some things that come across her desk that doesn't come across mine, and likewise.
Right.
And this is how we stay connected and keeping our people actively working.
Okay. Now, Rodney, you know, I want to keep in the conversation.
I'm
here.
enjoying it.
You know, the reality is that all of the things that they're saying is not new information to us, and that's what they're saying is
Yeah, we're together.
okay. I'm just trying to make sure we're all there. Okay. What we're talking about with this legislation is in support of the things that they're saying.
Right.
So why don't you delve into a little bit deeper into the legislation
Okay.
and talk about it.
Good. Well, one of the things that we looked at, quite frankly, was when our Supplier Development Council nationally and in Georgia in terms of how the private sector does business and what motivated them to have an increased purchasing from a supply base. So in order to determine how this is going to be done, our guest who's not here, Rodney Strong's company, has done quite a few disparity studies across the country. I myself has been part of opportunities to do disparity studies in other parts of the country and here in Georgia. And that's the basis for the bill, is to determine where the disparity exists, if there is one, for any specific targeted groups. That's number one. Once that's identified, then there has to be staff to support the activities. So in the bill, we propose that there would be a director and an advocate and support staff hired specifically to administer the program. We are looking at socially and economically disadvantaged federal guidelines to come up with what we see as a universal description of who we're trying to target. And obviously, as Sister Margaret has indicated, the African American black businesses, particularly in the construction trades, have been underutilized in a lot of areas. But it starts at the top, as you know, Roger. And I think the governor's going to have to see this as an opportunity to increase jobs in diverse communities, which is a growing segment of the population in the state of Georgia. The demographics are changing.
You know, I'm gonna let you finish, but you know, you keep saying to increase jobs, but add to that to also to create opportunities for independent companies to be able to grow and flourish.
Right.
Yes.
Now, I want to create jobs,
Right.
but as you know, you hear me say it all the time.
Right.
We have to also build
Build businesses. That's it.
and
Well,
build wealth. And,
Yes.
and that's
Yes.
not just jobs.
No. Exactly.
So I'm
But
just trying to get you to add that too.
No. So that's the point. That's the point. Representative Bruce has often, in all of our meetings that we've debated these issues, has been very strong about a legacy, passing the businesses on to future generations, and that the business does not go out of business once the original owners pass on.
Right.
So yes, creating jobs, but the jobs are in the businesses in the communities that need to have jobs that do not have the type of jobs that they need to have. So yes, that's the other part of the program. This would be statewide. All agencies would have to comply, including the university systems, the authorities. Every organization in the state would have to participate in this. And it's not meant to take business away from anyone. The idea is to make an economic impact on the growth of the state based upon the diversity that is growing in the state, and to contribute, believe it or not, to the local and state tax base. Because these businesses and these employees will pay into the coffers of state and local governments. So it's a win-win for local government. And as one of the reports recently published by the National Minority Supplier Development Council, there was something of 2,000 some odd businesses in their portfolio. There was $49 billion in tax revenue to local and state governments, just from the National Minority Supply Development Council minority companies. So we're not just talking about a giveaway. As Margaret said, this is a hand up, not a hand out, and it's a contributing factor to the local and state tax base.
You know, while you're talking, talk about some of the resistance that you experienced with this.
Well,
We both have experienced it.
Yes.
But I'm gonna let you talk
Yes.
about it, you know,
Well,
because I get a little angry when I talk about it.
I know. Well, our white colleagues feel as though it would be detrimental to majority firms that they would go out of business. Well, that's not going to happen. Number one, we don't have the capacity to take over all the businesses out there. We just don't have it, right, Margaret?
This is so
Right?
correct.
We don't have the capacity.
That's not gonna happen.
My sister just said she was looking for 250 opportunities, couldn't find a company. So we're not going to take your business away. You're not going to go out of business. That's number one. Number two, what has historically happened in other parts of the country, as Sister Margaret pointed out at the very beginning, when the tent was set to try to make an impact at that time, back in the day, in the 70s, to impact on African American businesses, the program was targeted at ethnic minorities. Then it expanded and expanded and expanded. So now a lot of the studies that are going on right now will show that white female-owned businesses are taking the lion's share of what's supposed to be a goals-based program. And unfortunately, the majority white male firms, in a lot of cases, put their daughter, their sister, their niece in the business and call it a woman-owned business. So our intent is not to discriminate against anyone. If there's a legitimate female-owned business that's in an industry that's underserved and not getting the contracts that group should get, then there'll be a goal for them. But this bill was designed so that we eliminate that 51% nonsense about being a minority-owned firm or women-owned firm. In this bill, it's got to be a minimum of 70% ownership by the targeted groups. And if it's only 70%, that's the percentage of the goal that you're meeting. If it's 100% minority-owned business or women-owned business, then the majority firm will get 100% towards their goal. What we've determined based upon our research is that the games, we've watched the games, we know the games that have been played, and we're trying to do something that's meaningful. So look, Georgia needs to shine. It's a Sunbelt state. This is not something that should be anathema to the leaders of this state. They've got to take a look at what's happening in the electorate, what's happening in the populace, and they've got to govern for everyone in this state. And that's what this bill proposes to do.
That's exactly right. It sounded like you were trying to say something wrong.
No. I agree with all that you said, and you know, and speaking to some of the things that Margaret said, I think it's incumbent upon us to work together to support the businesses, making sure they have the tools and the resources to be able to compete effectively when doors are opened, and that they're able to build the relationships so that they can win contracts and grow.
So we've already done this, as we said, in the Department of Transportation. Talk to us about what the successes associated with having done this there.
Well, one of the things I think at GDOT is that as a board, the board is committed. So leadership, it has to start at the top.
Right.
Hence, you're going to the top in terms of the legislature
Correct.
and our governor. And so the board has committed to that we would have a diverse group of suppliers that we do business with. So the board has set a goal. And so that it's up to the department to reach that goal. So that's very key.
And we, talk about the goals. How were they established?
The goal, they did a disparity study as well.
Okay.
They did a state and federal, because GDOT does state and federal. And so we have a state goal as well as a federal goal. And those goals change based on the opportunity, so there's change all the time. And so it's up to the department then, which I will give kudos to GDOT. The state program, they've done a phenomenal job in bringing in a supportive services group that is a rock star. They work with the suppliers, they work with the companies, they take you through the getting certified, which is required. You've got to be certified, you can't get around it. They tell you about the opportunities, they tell you if you don't meet the qualification, they take you through all of that, they help you, they can handhold you. You don't have that other places.
Can you see any valid reason why what you guys have done in the Department of Transportation cannot be done across the whole state?
No.
Is there any logical reason for not doing it?
In my mind, there is not.
Okay.
It's been done.
I have to say that in the majority of what Stacey said is true. I do applaud the new administration on GDOT for what they've done statewide. But when it comes to bonding and the majority of the work that goes on through GDOT, Georgia is the only state that requires certain criteria when it comes to the bonding, that the bonding companies, because they come to us and say, we need you to present again before the board, because GDOT has this very restrictive law when it comes to the bonding process for contractors. And so I'm going to ask you to take that back to the board.
Okay, absolutely.
And I'll send you the written information on it, because
Please
that is
do.
something that we discussed and went over very thoroughly in our last expo in this past September. How can we be more effective in getting GDOT to change their bonding process for the state, because it's the only state left with those restrictions.
I will gladly take the
What are
mantle.
some of the restrictions we're talking about?
Well, for instance, if Margaret is trying to get a bond and she brings in the bonding company, if I remember that's why I said I'm going to send her the rules and regulations. Typically, if you're putting down 10% of the bond amount, then the company can work with you. GDOT's restrictions are more than that.
Okay.
The percentages are higher?
Much.
Okay.
And when we talk about bonding, what are the typical sources of bonding in Georgia? I know the insurance companies and all these other things, but
Well, typically there are, but again, because in the black industry, it's much more difficult. We absolutely have special companies that work with us to assist us in getting bonding for our members. And we always tell them that you don't have to wait until you have a large contract that you're trying to bond.
That's exactly correct.
Start out getting a $10,000 or $25,000 bond and just work up your ability and your amount of bonding, so that you're not just left completely out of the job. If the job just calls for a $500,000 liability insurance, put your little bonding on the job as well, so that you can show some history, and these companies will tend to work with you. But state representatives, it's just like when you go get a car.
Have your credit.
If your credit is
The credit
different,
card is
and even if you've got a 700, because you come in looking a certain way, they still don't trust you, and still your percentage rate is 3 times higher than that of your counterpart. It's the same in the bonding process.
Okay. We got a couple of questions that people are watching online.
Yes.
And one of the questions, it says, can supplier diversity serve as a negative in any circumstances for minorities?
Yeah, if there are firms that claim that they are a minority and they really aren't, and they're what we call in the industry a front company, where there's really somebody behind them that controls the purse strings and controls the company, but it really isn't a minority person, that's the big negative. I don't see any real negatives other than that. That's the biggest problem we have in this whole industry of, quote, supplier diversity. And deal is, it's not a problem with the private sector.
No, and that's why
It's not a problem with the
corporations
private
are
sector.
members of our, because I
That's
take care
right.
of that.
No,
I
it's
make
not
sure
a
that
problem.
doesn't
Let me
happen.
make that clear. We're talking about government-run programs around the country. That's what we're talking about.
And this whole thing about the government, you know, I guess, you know, my thought when I hear that is, are we going to put ourselves in a situation where we become too dependent on the government
Ah, good point.
for our existence as minority-owned businesses? I think that's where that question is coming from. If everybody's going after government contracts and not trying to find a space,
Right.
you know, in private industry, are we hurting ourselves?
Well, most of the businesses.
I think that's what that question is.
Okay, so most of the businesses in our community do not do business with government contracts because
Exactly.
they can't meet some of the qualifications. They don't have the history.
And they typically have a blend.
Correct.
Yeah,
but
they
it,
typically
but
have a
but
blend.
if you're a small business person, your basket of customers should be diverse.
Yes,
You should have all your eggs in any one
Yes, I
basket.
agree.
But the most important thing about getting into the government contracting area, if you can, as a tier 2 subcontractor, if you will, you build the relationships that you talked about. And a lot of companies that I've interviewed in disparity studies around the country have been able to get contracts with those companies outside of government contracts. Private work from companies that they wound up getting to know because there was a goal. So they don't depend upon just the government contracts. If they do a good job and develop the relationships that have to be developed in business to get
Right.
business, then there's opportunities beyond government contracts with
Right.
that firm.
But
And
I
there's
think
a
that, I
special
think that was
training
where
that
it
goes
was going
along
with
with trying to acquire government contracts. And as an association, as Stacey said earlier, you have to present that training, and that is something that we do within the association to make sure that they have all the necessary tools to move their businesses to the next level. And so right now, as you stated, Rodney, that a majority of the work is in the public, local sector, and we're having to work greater to get to that private sector, the government section.
Another question that came in, it says, this is from Tracy R. What are some of the biggest drawbacks when considering SDPs within most agencies?
Supplier Diversity Program.
Oh, obstacles
Yeah,
in starting a program,
Yeah.
you mean?
yeah.
Okay.
It says, what is it said, the question is what are some of the biggest drawbacks?
Drawbacks. Oh, the resistance from doing business as usual. That's the biggest obstacle. Well, we've never had to do this before. And
Resource. We don't have the resource.
we don't have the resources, and we don't know how to do this, and that sort of a thing. That's the biggest obstacle. And
It's the mindset.
leadership from the top. I think Stacey said it well. There's got to be leadership from the top that supports this program. As you know, back in the day when you were in school here, you worked with Maynard,
I did.
and you saw firsthand how leadership at the top changed
Yeah.
doing business in Atlanta.
And it's important. You know, all these boards and agencies and all the different things that we are part of or need to be part of, especially on the boards of banks and insurance companies and places where they may not be familiar with all the things that we had to deal with historically. And that's what he's referring to with Maynard. And I say this often because I was just very impressed with the way he handled it. When there were no African Americans on the boards of any bank in the Metro Atlanta area, and he asked people to add African Americans to their boards for the purpose of them being able to understand some of the things problems we had with bonding and everything else. And when they told him that they weren't going to comply with putting African Americans on their boards, he said, okay, well, I'm just going to take the city money out of your bank until you do. And then all of a sudden, we had African Americans on every bank in
That happens.
town.
You know, and everybody here knows me, so I can't make excuses for how I feel about things. But I have to say, on the other side of that, where so many of us have been granted those opportunities that you just spoke of for those particular reasons of trying to make a difference in our community, and unfortunately, too many of us get on those positions and we get comfortable. We only start thinking about our lifestyle, and we forget how we got there and why we are there, and just absolutely choose not to do nothing in those positions.
And that is unfortunate if that happens, but the reality is though we still have to be on there.
Oh, you
okay?
absolutely.
And we have to make sure we
You
put
have
the
to
right
make
people
sure,
on
right?
there.
That's the key,
Yeah,
right there.
one of my colleagues used to say you can either, you know, if you're at the dinner table, you want to be part. You could either be the meal, or you could be
That's right.
at the dinner.
At the dinner.
And I choose not to be the meal.
So,
I love that.
So why don't we do this? Because we have to wrap it up.
yes, sir.
You know, wrap it up by telling people about your organization, how to contact you, and what benefits they have from supporting what you do. And you do the same thing, and you do the same thing. Okay.
Well, again, I represent the Georgia Black Constructors Association. We are a statewide association of blacks in construction and throughout the industry, just not those who are putting nails to hammer. Our website is gablackconstructors.org. Again, that's gablackconstructors.org. Our phone number is 678-750-3486, and our job is just connecting you with the resources for the contract opportunities.
Okay.
And so GMSDC, the Georgia Minority Supplier Development Council, is a statewide organization and part of a national network, an organization that focuses on certifying, developing, connecting, and advocating on behalf of ethnic minorities. So Hispanic, African American, Native American, and Asian small business owners. And so we do a certification, as mentioned. We certify them to make sure they are who they say they are. We provide developmental programs. We've got a financial summit coming up with the Federal Reserve. We have programs throughout the whole year. Then we connect them to the corporations you know and love here in Georgia: Georgia Power, Home Depot, UPS, Delta Airlines, all the ones you know and love, and lots of others that you don't know. And then we advocate for policies and things that help small businesses and make sure that they've got the tools and resources they need to grow.
How do they reach you?
www.gmsdc.org or 404-589-4929.
All right, Rodney?
Yes, my name is Rodney Littles, as you know, and I've been an advocate for minority business development for most of my career. I currently and have been an advisor to the Legislative Black and Hispanic Caucus in the state of New York in the development of that program in the state of New York, which now has a 30% goal statewide. Again, that's because of the leadership at the state level. The governor said this is what we're going to do, and we provided the evidence to do it. If you're interested in supporting HB 90, you can find it on the House website, house.ga.gov, under Roger Bruce. The bill will be there, HB 90. You can contact us at 404-656-7859 if you would like to submit a letter of support, or you would like for us to come and speak to your community about this bill.
Okay.
One last thing.
Go ahead.
If you would like to get more information about what I talked about at the start of the program, you can go to www.blacktaxed.com, and it talks about the economic impact and the diversity that we need to have in this country.
All right. And again, I'm State Representative Roger Bruce, and you know, this legislation is very important to not only me, but to everybody in this state. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, green, or purple. The reality is that we should all be working together to try to make sure that everybody in the state prospers. And the more people that are prosperous, the better the state is. We need to, you know, focus on how do we start this process of creating generational wealth that can be passed on from generation to generation. And this is one way to get started with that. Again, I want to thank you for your input today. Thank you for being part of it.
Thank you.
And once again, this is Under the Gold Dome, and we look forward to seeing you again next week.